A corruption scandal is rocking the EU Parliament as a vice president remanded in custody after investigators found bags of cash in their home.
Treacherous weather and freezing conditions in the UK and some parts of Europe has meant major disruption to travel on the roads and at airports.
The alleged bribery scandal emerging from the European Parliament of late has been called one of the most serious to hit Brussels for years. Many want a parliamentary inquiry and a European Parliament debate about corruption within the institutions. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has also reacted.
For us, it is very critical to have not only strong rules, but the same rules also covering all the European institutions and not to allow for any kind of exemptions. So it's a matter of transparency, it's a matter of very clear rules.
For some experts who've been writing about transparency for years, the European Parliament is the weakest link, and these kind of scandals are bound to happen.
It is the only institutions that basically has virtually no rules imposed on their representatives and very weak enforcement on those ethical rules. So basically, a quarter of our representatives at side jobs are exposed to conflict of interest on a daily basis. And this affects not only the image of the European Parliament, but of the old European integration process, and also affects the very interest of the Union at a time of unprecedented geopolitical reshuffle.
With Eva Kaili, the Vice President of the European Parliament and a former MEP now behind bars, Alberto Alemano hopes the Parliament radically rethinks its rules on lobbying to prevent them from leading to corruption.
The European Union has, on paper, an ethics and integrity system that is quite sophisticated, quite advanced. However, it contains a lot of loopholes, and this is certainly the case for the European Parliament. So hopefully this is going to be a moment of reckoning for many political leaders who have been opposing, in particular within the Parliament, the adoption of stricter rules.
As it stands, according to their internal code of conduct, MEPs cannot accept gifts of over €150. They're supposed to report as well their meetings with lobbyists and stakeholders. Maeve McMahon, Euronews, Brussels.
A blanket of snow has covered London and parts of the UK, causing major travel disruption on the roads and at airports, with more than 300 flights cancelled. Temperatures have dropped to minus 10 degrees Celsius in some areas in recent days. There are yellow alerts for snow, fog and frost in several areas, including the southeast and southwest of England and the north of Scotland. The snow has also affected Poland, with delays and disruption on public transport and roads. Meteorologists say the country will be in the grip of freezing conditions, as temperatures will soon drop to minus 10 to 15 degrees Celsius, possibly reaching minus 20. A cold spell in Estonia meant there were more than 10,000 homes without power by Monday afternoon. Flights were cancelled, trains were delayed, and ferries were disrupted by the strong winds. Meanwhile, in the northwest area of Bosnia-Herzegovina and also in Croatia, heavy rainfall over the weekend caused rivers to overflow, which flooded dozens of houses. A body was discovered in Bosnia-Herzegovina after a landslide buried a section of a road.
There is shock and many unanswered questions in Solihull, central England, after the deaths of 3 children who fell into an icy lake on Sunday. A 4th child is also in a critical condition in hospital. And the search is not over, amid uncertainties that more children may have been involved.
Those reports don't match the children that were rescued from the lake yesterday. However, we have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing, but until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Local police have appealed for witnesses to find out exactly how this tragedy happened. The British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has said his thoughts were with the families involved.
Russian officials consistently conduct information operations suggesting that Belarus conventional ground forces might join Russia's invasion of Ukraine, says the Institute for the Study of War in its latest report that focuses on how the Belarus regime's support for Russian invasion and Moscow's pressure on Minsk to become more involved further constrains Belarus' readiness and willingness to enter the war in Ukraine. Now, the think tank says Belarus is extraordinarily unlikely to invade Ukraine in the foreseeable future. A Belarus intervention in Ukraine, moreover, would not be able to do more than draw Ukrainian ground forces away from other parts of the theater temporarily. The Belarus regime's support for the Russian invasion has already made Belarus a co-belligerent in the war in Ukraine. President Alexander Lukashenko offered Belarus territory to Russian forces for the initial staging of the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Belarus territory offered critical ground lines of communication to the Russian armed forces in their failed drive on Kyiv and their subsequent withdrawal from northern Ukraine. The Institute for the Study of War has previously assessed that Belarus materially supports Russian offensive in Ukraine and provides Russian forces with secure territory and airspace from which to attack Ukraine with high-precision weapons. The think tank says the Kremlin's efforts to pressure Belarus to support the Russian offensive campaign in Ukraine are a part of a long-term effort to cement further control over Belarus. The Ukrainian Resistance Center reported that 12,000 Russian personnel is stationed in Belarus. The Belarus military likely has a relatively limited capacity to train existing and new personnel. It is comprised of roughly 45,000 active personnel. Lukashenko's setting of information conditions likely further constrains Belarus' willingness to enter the war. Belarus president continues to set informational conditions to resist Russian pressure to enter the war in Ukraine by claiming that NATO is preparing to attack Belarus.
Close we can get to it because it's
Since the mid-1960s, a space station has been operating in Sweden, 200 kilometres north of the Arctic Circle. The launch facility at Jukkasjärvi is aiming to be the first on European soil to launch satellites into orbit. The remoteness of the site, with its vast deserted forests surrounding the station, is the very reason the location was chosen.
in this area we have 5,200 square kilometers where no one lives, so we can easily launch a rocket that flies into this area, falling down without anyone getting harmed.
More than 600 rockets have already been launched from Jukkasjärvi, but so far they've been suborbital flights. Usually the missions have been concerned with scientific research.
It's a bit like a Lego, so we're taking the different experiments in sections, adding one to another. This is one of the experiments, this is planetary formation, but we also have biology experiments, we have material science and a fluid experiment on board.
There are other launch sites in Europe, such as in the Azores, Norway, the Shetland Islands off the UK and in the Spanish region of Andalusia. But the researchers at Jukkasjärvi think they're ahead of the pack and hopes are high that their rockets could be carrying satellites into space as early as next year.
Feeling the freedom of huge waves. That's what this Australian surfer is doing, with waves of around 12 metres high off the Portuguese coastline. Matt Formston is among the best disabled surfers in the world. The 44-year-old's disability is blindness, but that hasn't stopped him from following his dream.
I dreamed that I would be a professional surfer, and that dream seemed to be unrealistic for me as a person with a disability. But now I'm a professional surfer, and we put together a plan and we started working out the processes for me to surf a wave of that size as a blind surfer, using a whistle and other communication rather than being able to see. I grew up with full vision, and when I was about 5 years old, I lost 95% of my peripheral vision, which is the outsides of your vision, and all of my central vision. So if you put your fists in front of your eyes, which blocks out all of your central vision, I can only see the outsides, but of that, if you blur it out, blur, make it blurry like you're rubbing your windscreen with sandpaper.
Matt's next dream is to see parasurfing making its Paralympic debut in 2028 in LA.